The rich woman slapped the training class teacher, shouting that I am a fake, and arrogantly claimed that she would shut down the training center. The dean hurriedly dragged the teacher to apologize to the students. Recalling how the dean, in order to recruit students, asked her to adopt more diverse teaching methods each time. She even made her disguise as a student to learn from the neighboring school, only for her true identity to be exposed. The dean decisively shifted the blame. In addition to the troubles at work, the teacher's personal life also left her utterly exhausted. When eating out, the old party preferred to rush the teacher out to avoid making the next customers wait. Faced with such a weary life, the teacher immediately resigned and returned home to help her aunt manage the guest house left by her grandmother. When the teacher arrived, her aunt showed no surprise and simply asked when she would return to school. The teacher didn't want to recall that humiliating experience and just lightly said that she wasn't cut out to be a teacher and expressed her intention to stay and fix up the guest house. The next day, the teacher bought paint and decoration materials to start repainting the house, but her aunt showed no interest. That evening, a heavy rain suddenly began. The teacher hurried outside to check, only to find that all her hard work had been washed away. She turned to go back inside, but the door's lock came off. She desperately knocked and called her aunt, but received no response. This man, who was always watching the neighboring guest house owner's granddaughter, had been staring at her for 10 years. Seeing her spaced out by the roadside, he would hurriedly bike over as if it was a coincidence. If he saw her about to pass the bookstore, he would rush back to prepare a hot cup of coffee for her. In fact, all these encounters were arranged on purpose, and he meticulously recorded every one in his blog. That evening, the girl arrived at his bookstore. Seeing her with a tired face, he poured her a cup of hot coffee, then sat reading while answering her questions. Suddenly, the girl noticed that the light in her aunt's room had turned on and stood up to leave. He hurriedly put his coat on her, pretending to continue reading. The next day, he noticed that the girl seemed upset, with tears on her face, but he didn't know how to comfort her, so he silently stood by her side. Suddenly, his younger sister passed by and asked him if the girl was the one named Irene in his diary, teasing them. He quickly shooed his sister away. When the girl curiously asked about the past, the bookstore's phone rang, easing the awkward atmosphere. The caller was a classmate inviting him to a reunion. He took the girl along, and everyone warmly greeted each other after many years. Suddenly, his classmate asked if he had a crush on someone, making him shy. Under the teasing of the others, he blurted out the girl's name, leaving the girl dumbfounded. Caught off guard by the sudden confession from the boy, the teacher was shocked, and the room fell silent. Just then, the classmate noticed the boy had gone missing, and everyone quickly began searching, distracting attention from their situation. Back at home, the teacher couldn't sleep and decided to go talk to the boy. When he saw her, he hesitated and quickly said that the matter was in the past, that the relationship was over, and shut the door on her, fleeing in a hurry. But after a moment, realizing his mistake, he quickly opened the door and saw the teacher standing there in a daze. He asked her what she wanted, but she only picked a book and seemed ready to leave. The boy avoided looking at her. The next day, the teacher went to her grandmother's grave with her aunt. She couldn't help but complain to her grandmother about how her aunt had shut down the guest house on her own and wore sunglasses all day. Thinking back to the happy times with her grandmother, she became sad and left early. She went to the local pharmacy to buy medicine for a headache and overheard the shopkeeper mentioning that her aunt had been suffering from severe headaches. When she returned home, she persuaded her aunt to go to the hospital, but her aunt said it was a long-standing issue from years of writing and didn't take it seriously. She urged the teacher to return to work. Upon seeing the job advertisement posted outside the bookstore, she hurriedly went inside to find the boy, only to discover it was a job posting for workers at his family's factory. She didn't know how to work in the factory, so she was about to leave. The boy quickly suggested that she could work at his bookstore, while he would go work at the factory. The classmates were gossiping that her mother was the murderer of her father, and the news had even come from her best friend. This completely shattered her, and she couldn't help but burst into tears. Back then, when she returned home after school, the neighbors had gathered around her door, and she saw her mother being taken away by the police, arrested on suspicion of killing her husband. As a result, she was taken by her aunt to live in the countryside with her grandmother. At her new school, a girl admired her greatly and helped her in many ways. The two quickly became best friends. One day, the girl confided her secret to her best friend, promising not to tell anyone in Sanbao town. However, to her surprise, the secret quickly spread among their classmates. The best friend explained, swearing it wasn't intentional, but the girl no longer trusted her. They ended their friendship, and the girl became the center of cruel gossip among the classmates. This caused her immense shame, and when they learned that her mother was a murderer, she was ostracized and bullied. Unable to bear it any longer, she fought back against the classmates who had been tormenting her. Her grandmother was forced to go to the school to apologize and even kneel to beg for forgiveness. This made the girl feel deeply wronged, and she was ready to take her own life, but someone called her back at the last moment. Years later, the girl returned to her hometown, and her former best friend sent a classmate to ask for forgiveness, claiming everything was a misunderstanding and hoping to reconcile, but the girl ignored it. The next day, her best friend suddenly showed up in person, leaving her stunned. The weather had started to turn cold, and the water pipes at the sailor's house broke. She and her aunt tried unsuccessfully to fix it, so they decided to spend the night outside. Unable to resolve the issue, the teacher messaged the boy for help. He warmly welcomed them and offered them new blankets, adjusting the heating before leaving to return home. The next morning, the teacher woke up and returned to the guest house to find the house covered with icicles and water flowing out everywhere. At that moment, her aunt ran out, and she learned that her aunt had used a blowtorch to melt the water pipes, causing a fire, which had resulted in the pipes bursting. Her aunt said she was going to a friend's house and told the teacher to figure it out on her own. The teacher contacted repairmen, but the earliest they could come was in 5 days. Desperate, the teacher considered staying at a nearby hotel, but the trip to and from the bookstore took over an hour. She then thought about heading straight to Seoul, but the boy desperately stopped her and insisted she stay on the second floor. Reluctantly, the teacher agreed. That evening, the teacher heard the sound of the door opening, thinking it was the boy returning. She rushed downstairs, only to find it was the boy's younger sister, who had come to complain. The younger sister confided that she liked a smart and talented boy, but he didn't like her, leaving her feeling frustrated. The teacher wasn't really listening. Instead, she was eager to know where the boy had gone. The boy's younger sister guessed that he might have gone up the mountain, and without saying a word, the teacher rushed outside. The girl walked up the mountain, the surrounding area dark and quiet, and she grew more and more scared as she walked. Suddenly, she slipped and fell to the ground. Quickly getting up, she started running again, only to collide with the boy, who was coming down the mountain. Without thinking, she hugged the boy, crying in distress. He simply stood there, watching her quietly. When she calmed down, they both headed back down the mountain together. Back at the bookstore, the boy made her a cup of tea. The teacher explained that she had been afraid of staying home alone since childhood, which was why she had gone out to look for him. But once she reached the foot of the mountain, she had become too scared and unknowingly lost her way. The boy reminded her never to go up the mountain alone and hurriedly backed away. The next day, they went to the dry cleaners in the town, where they ran into the former best friend. The best friend invited the teacher to a nearby cafe to talk. As soon as they sat down, the teacher asked her what she still wanted to say. The best friend repeatedly emphasized that it was all a misunderstanding. She explained that it was because classmates had spread bad rumors about the sailor, and she had to reveal the story about the teacher's mother killing someone. After hearing the explanation, the teacher simply walked away, ignoring her best friend's calls as she chased after her. On her way home, the teacher stopped by the pharmacy to buy some headache medicine. At that moment, the boy received a phone call from a friend, informing him that someone was trapped on the mountain and needed his help. As the sky grew darker, there was still no news, and everyone began to worry. He was the village's savior, as no one knew the mountain better than he did. Whenever someone got lost on the mountain, they would ask for his help, and he had saved many people over the years. However, this time, despite the late hour, there was still no news, and the anxiety grew. Suddenly, he spotted a shoe and called out the person's name, but there was no answer. As tensions rose, he carried the missing girl down the mountain, and the teacher breathed a sigh of relief. Just as she was about to approach, the boy's parents rushed over and embraced the boy. The teacher quietly took a car back home. When the boy got home, his mother scolded him for being reckless and told him not to take such risks again. Only after his sister intervened did their mother stop scolding him. Later that day, after the bookstore's book club ended, the boy gave the teacher a pair of hiking boots. She mentioned that the roads here were difficult and the boots would be more convenient, before hurrying off. That evening, after the teacher finished tidying up the bookstore, she noticed that the boy had fallen asleep at the table, exhausted. The teacher gently draped a blanket over him and quietly sat nearby, looking at him with a soft gaze. The boy, waking up groggily, noticed the blanket and started looking for the teacher but couldn't find her. At that moment, the teacher was returning from buying groceries and ran into her mother. Since her mother's release from prison, the teacher only saw her twice a year, and their meetings were always brief, just meals and tea with no real communication. The teacher didn't know why her mother had come this time, but reluctantly followed her back to the guest house. There, she saw her aunt directing workers to repair the house. Her mother, upon learning that her sister had closed the guest house without permission, scolded her sister sharply and left in a huff. That night, the teacher confronted her mother at the guest house, demanding to know the reason for her visit. Her mother simply replied, "It's none of your business." The teacher had heard this phrase countless times since childhood, and it saddened her deeply. It didn't sound like something a parent should say to their child. As she grew more emotional, she pressed her mother further, asking why she hadn't accepted her visits when she was in prison, why she had never shown affection, and why she had killed her father. Her mother remained silent, offering no explanation. In frustration, the teacher told her mother to leave the next day and to contact them beforehand if she ever planned to visit again. She then returned to the bookstore. The next morning, her mother came to the bookstore to find the boy and asked him to pass a message to an old friend before leaving. The teacher, just returning, saw this and curiously asked the boy how she knew her mother. The boy replied that she had met her mother when he was 10 at a bus station, thought she was beautiful, but noticed she wore large sunglasses. When her mother took them off, the boy saw the scars on her eyes from being beaten. The guest house was finally repaired, and the teacher began packing her things. Later that evening, the boy returned from the factory and, as usual, urged the teacher to rest while he finished cleaning up. However, he had forgotten that today was the day the teacher was returning home. The teacher stood up, thanked the boy, and said goodbye. The boy hurriedly followed her out, but the two didn't speak a word during the quiet journey back to her house. After seeing the teacher safely home, the boy returned to the bookstore, suddenly feeling an emptiness in his heart. Soon after, the school's 50th anniversary event was approaching. The students from all walks of life returned for the school reunion, making the school campus lively and bustling. That evening, the teacher, dressed elegantly, arrived at the school and ran into her crush, a classmate who had always had feelings for her. Her crush told the teacher that he had only attended the event to see her and that he came just for her. The teacher expressed her gratitude, remembering that it was him who had helped her during their school days by sitting with her at lunch and helping her fit in with other girls who had initially excluded her. This helped break down the barriers. As the time for making wishes arrived, her crush took the opportunity to confess his feelings, but the teacher politely rejected him. She explained that she had already met someone who could offer her warmth and affection. After expressing her thanks again, she hurried off to find the boy to participate in the wish-making activity. Just then, the boy called out to her from behind. The wish-making event had begun, and the teacher immediately confessed her love for the boy, admitting she had secretly admired him for over 20 years. However, the boy rejected her outright. When he heard a friend calling for him, the boy quickly ran off. The scene was witnessed by the teacher's younger sister, who concluded that the teacher had been rejected by her brother and tried to comfort her, telling her not to take it to heart, as it wasn't her fault. Despite her sister's comfort, the teacher returned home feeling gloomy. The next day, while cleaning up the graduation photos at school, the teacher overheard a friend talking about how the boy didn't care about losing things but was particularly attached to a keychain. The teacher remembered that she had personally carved the keychain as a memento meant for her friend. At the time, the copper table was the boy's. The teacher, in a hurry, rushed out of the school and back to the bookstore, desperately asking the boy if the keychain in his car was the one he had given her. The boy quickly denied it, claiming that he had carved it himself. At that moment, The teacher's former best friend arrived at the bookstore to greet the boy, then went straight into the shop. The teacher, feeling awkward, quickly left. Back at the bookstore, the boy began to feel uneasy and decided to go after the teacher, but then his mother called for him to help with laundry, so he went to assist. Later that evening, the boy couldn't shake the memories of the time spent with the teacher at the bookstore and found it hard to sleep. He sat outside alone, letting the cold wind blow, which made him feel sick. The next day, the man called to inform her that she didn't need to go to work, which angered her. She decided to visit the bookstore to find out what was going on, but when she arrived, the shop door was locked, and there was no response when she knocked. She mistakenly assumed that the man was with her former best friend. Upset, she returned home and vented her anger on her aunt, even scolding the family dog, leaving her aunt confused. That day, since the book club event was canceled, the boy's aunt informed the teacher, who found out that the boy had come down with a serious cold. The teacher hurried to the bookstore but found it locked. Meanwhile, the boy had been taken home by his mother, who was carefully tending to him. The mother soon noticed that the boy was acting strangely, much like when he had disappeared years ago, and became concerned. The next day, the boy's health had improved slightly, and he was staring blankly at the door when he saw a familiar figure pass by. He quickly chased after it, and by nightfall, he still hadn't returned home. His mother, increasingly worried, began calling friends, but no one knew his whereabouts. Meanwhile, the teacher, unable to sit still, gathered the courage to grab a flashlight and went up the mountain to search for the boy. After struggling to find a small cabin, she still couldn't locate the boy. Despite her concerns for the boy's health, the teacher continued to search, offering her warmth in the cold night, but the boy, cold and distant, remained unappreciative and warned her not to come up again, walking away without a second glance. The next day, the teacher skipped breakfast, still feeling ill, but went to work at the bookstore as usual, ignoring the boy's presence. The boy, now feeling better, went shopping with his mother at the market. The mother was very angry, scolding the boy for dragging his sick body up to the cabin in the mountains. The boy reluctantly admitted that he had seen a vision of his biological mother that morning, which unknowingly led him up the mountain. He promised his mother that he would not go back up the mountain without her permission in the future. Back at the bookstore, the teacher, still sick, was sleeping at the desk. The boy called his sister, asking her to bring some medicine later that evening. After the book club event ended, the boy gave the teacher the medicine, but the teacher refused it. The boy hurriedly followed her, but the teacher demanded an answer to her confession. The boy could only apologize, which further upset the teacher, who angrily stormed off. At home, the teacher was heartbroken by boy's rejection and cried in pain. Later, the boy left his sister's weekly required books on the mountain, and his sister called to remind him to retrieve them or risk losing credits. The boy's mother rushed to the bookstore to stop him from going alone, and coincidentally, she met the teacher, asking her to accompany the boy. So, the two of them reluctantly went up the mountain together, neither of them speaking to the other. After retrieving the books from the cabin, the teacher told the boy to go back, as she wanted to go to the mountain top alone. The boy, still concerned, followed her, forgetting about his sister's credits. As they passed a small wet river, the boy reached out to grab the teacher's hand, but the teacher still ignored him. Soon they reached the mountain top, and the teacher gazed at the view below, reflecting on her feelings and repeating her love for the boy. She explained that it was because the boy was so warm that she had started to doubt her own feelings. "Since you don't want me to doubt," the teacher said, "I won't doubt anymore." She then turned to leave, but the boy grabbed her arm, pulling her back, and the two shared a passionate embrace. Afterward, they walked down the mountain hand in hand, exchanging loving words, forgetting that their happiness had been bought at the expense of his sister's academic credits. When the teacher returned home, she was in high spirits, playfully wrestling with the dog, which puzzled her aunt. After the two confirmed their relationship, the boy was about to go and settle some matters but promised he would contact the teacher afterward. The next day, the teacher sat by the window all morning, staring at her phone, anxiously waiting for the boy to call. She kept checking the phone, wondering if it was broken, but by evening, she still hadn't heard from the boy. Feeling disappointed, she went to the bookstore the next day. But the teacher, still upset, refused to go. The boy noticed the change in her tone and invited her again. This time, The teacher declined, saying that she felt uncomfortable being around the boy. It seemed that the teacher regretted what happened on the mountain. The boy quickly reassured her that it wasn't a mistake, apologizing again with his actions. They made up, and as they were walking home later that evening, they suddenly heard that the boy's father had gotten into a fight with the villagers. The boy rushed over to stop him and learned that it was because Hod's mother had been worried about the boy disappearing again. The father had gone to tell the village head to stop letting the boy help find people in the mountains. The village head, upon hearing this, mocked the boy, saying he was just a child of a stranger. This led to a confrontation between the two. Meanwhile, the teacher learned through a friend that the boy had grown up in the mountains with his biological father. However, his father had suddenly disappeared, leaving him an orphan. Fortunately, his current adoptive father found him and took him in as his own. A man, looking worn out from traveling, arrived at the bus station and began asking about the boy's biological father. Upon hearing this, the boy's adoptive father hurried back home to tell his wife that the boy's uncle might have returned. The wife was furious, fearing he might come to demand money from the boy, and urged her husband to check on the bookstore. On the way to school, the boy's younger sister suddenly remembered seeing a man last night who seemed to be the same person from her brother's wallet. She quickly rode her bike back to the bookstore, but by the time she arrived, the man had already found it. The boy invited him in, and the man told him that he wanted to take her to a very distant place. The man told the boy that they were blood relatives, and that her current adoptive parents were just outsiders. He claimed that all debts had been settled over the years, and he was now going to take Annie with him. After the boy came out, he told the teacher that he was going to a faraway place and instructed her to take care of the bookstore. Just then, his younger sister shouted a warning, telling Annie not to go, and then ran home to report to their parents. The elderly couple was deeply upset upon hearing this. The uncle took the boy to the beach and revealed that he had bought the place using the money the boy's family had given him and his own earnings, with plans to open a bookstore for the boy. He expressed his desire to spend the rest of his life with him, but back at home, his adoptive parents couldn't sleep after the boy left. They didn't want him to go but felt helpless, fearing he might never come back. Just as Huss' father stepped outside, he was surprised to see the boy standing in the yard. Meanwhile, at school, rumors about the teacher's mother being a murderer were spreading, and classmates avoided her, making each day feel like a trip to hell. In despair, she decided to take a train to the river to end her life. However, as she prepared to jump in, her stomach growled from hunger. She decided to have one last meal before going through with it. After enjoying a nice meal at a nearby restaurant, she became so tired that she fell asleep, putting off her plans for a while. But when she woke up, she realized that if she kept delaying, she might never follow through, so she left the restaurant, returned to the river, and continued with her original plan. Before she could go any further, she heard someone calling her name. Turning around, she saw her aunt rushing towards her. Her aunt grabbed her and hugged her tightly, vowing that if she ever thought of doing something so foolish again, she would go with her. This was the moment when the teacher abandoned her suicide plans for good. The boy, moved by the teacher's experience, thanked her for not going through with it back then, which allowed them to have a chance to be together now. The two swore to never be apart again. What the teacher didn't know was that back then, her aunt had rushed to save the teacher because the boy had followed her. At the train station, the boy had seen the teacher and secretly followed her, calling her aunt as soon as he saw the teacher heading toward the river. The boy then watched her aunt pull the teacher away from the river, which made him feel relieved and leave. Back then, meanwhile, the teacher's aunt went to her sister's house for dinner but discovered her brother-in-law was attacking her elder sister. In a panic, she pushed him down the stairs, grabbing her sister and trying to escape. But her brother-in-law chased after them, smashing the car with a metal rod. As he stood in front of the car to strike again, the boy's younger sister panicked and hit the accelerator, killing him instantly. Shocked, the younger sister immediately called the police, and her sister dragged her away, telling her to go home and not tell anyone about the incident. Before the police arrived, she wiped off the fingerprints her sister had left on the car. As expected, not long after her younger sister returned home, the police called, informing her that her sister had been reported for the murder of her husband. Shortly afterward, her sister was sentenced to 7 years in prison. The younger sister decided to return to her family's hometown to raise the teacher. During a prison visit, Her sister only asked her to continue writing novels, to have a normal romantic life, and to spend more time with the teacher. The aunt, overwhelmed by the guilt from the past, couldn't live with the burden anymore. She decided to write her painful story into a novel and, after finishing it, intended to turn herself in to the authorities. When she discovered the detailed account of her aunt accidentally killing her father, she was immediately stunned, and tears uncontrollably began to fall. At that moment, her mother returned home. The teacher turned to her mother for confirmation, but the mother didn't know how to respond. It seemed like the teacher understood everything. Without waiting for an answer, she slammed the door and stormed out. She couldn't believe that the person who had killed her father was the aunt who had raised her all these years. The teacher completely broke down upon learning the truth, unable to trust anything anymore. She realized that she had been living in a lie for so many years. The boy came to find her, gently took her hand, and silently stayed with her. The teacher confessed that she didn't want to return home, and the boy didn't press her. Soon after, the teacher fell into a deep sleep, only to wake up later in the boy's car. To her surprise, the boy had driven her to the house where their family of 3 had once lived. It was there that the teacher realized that after her mother's release from prison, she had been living in that house. The boy tried to explain to her, urging her to understand the difficult decisions both her mother and aunt had made. They had kept the truth from her to avoid hurting her. Later, the teacher returned home, only to find police cars outside her house. She thought that her aunt must have turned herself in, but upon closer inspection, she realized the police were there to arrest young people having an illicit party behind the house. She sighed in relief. Her aunt, noticing how worried the teacher had been, realized that she had been concerned about her. The teacher told her aunt that while she hated her, she didn't want her to turn herself in. She was willing to continue living with the pain, but she needed some time away from her to process everything. The teacher then went to find the boy to say goodbye, explaining her decision. Although the boy didn't want her to leave, he didn't try to stop her. And so, the teacher returned to her hometown, beginning a new chapter in her life.